The theme of today's session is to look at non-judgment a little bit more, okay? And it's going to be an interactive session, so it's not so much me talking. And maybe just let's look at why non-judgment? Why is non-judgment important?
Everything is changing every moment, every nanosecond, even in the atmosphere. So as beings, we also are changing, and the person in front of me, even my child, is changing. So if I am like judgmental, I know that a second before my child behaved in a different way, and if I'm non-judgmental, then I can think of that perspective that maybe he's changed at this moment.
Thank you very much for bringing in this very wide perspective that things change moment to moment. Someone said that you don't enter the same river twice. Yeah. So you think it's the same water, but it has flown. So our relationships are also like that. We are changing, our children are changing. It's not the same. And yet we go with a fixed notion, right? We'll still meet, we may probably still meet our parents or our aunts, our uncles who still see us, with that same notion, but we are very different right now. And they still make references to traits and characteristics that we may not so identify with where we are and who we are right now. And so it's a very common human tendency. It's not like some people do it and some people don't, it's just the mind. That's the way the mind works. And the mind goes into judging and categorizing, right? So we just get familiar with our mind, that's all. Okay? Because the moment we start to notice, okay, that seems like I'm making a judgment here, we can do something about it, right? So just let's see maybe what is the effect of when we come in with a sense of judgment on maybe with our children. We'll keep it very specific, maybe to parenting, okay? So I would need about, I think all of us can participate, but I'll need about 12 volunteers just for an activity. You'll have a little slip on which something is written. You won't know what that is. And it will be pinned to your back. And you'll roam around, and all of us will also roam around, and people will respond to you based on what is written on your back. Okay? What went on for you? How did you feel? What did you notice? Did anyone have that experience that you didn't like it? Yeah. Can you say something?
So it was something that I don't know or I cannot read that was on my back. And that is something that generally many people don't know about themselves, but others can see them or in that way. So sometimes it gets confusing why people are behaving with me like that. And I'm not able to judge myself what others are able to. And that creates a confusion sometimes.
That's the way introjections form. How do we form a view about ourselves? How do we say this is who I am, right? Based on what we've received, especially as children, right? Because at that time we do not have a self-concept, right? It's forming, right? And the way people are perceiving us, especially significant people, parents, neighbors, teachers, friends as we get older, right? The way they're perceiving us is making an impact. We are taking it in, the children are taking it in, and making it their own. This is the formation of self-talk, right? It's what you will start to tell yourself till you start to become aware, what am I saying? Okay? We understand the impact of negative labels, right? Yeah. But what about positive labels? Is it all right to tell a child, you're so smart. Yeah. You never do anything wrong. How did you get that wrong? When you're so smart. How is that statement? What does it do? It is a burden, yes. So sometimes positive labels feel like a burden. Do we have that for ourselves? Yeah? We identify that for ourselves. It feels like a burden. I got to meet this now. All the time, I got to be smart. If I'm not, I don't live up to some measure. And that dissatisfaction, right? It's never enough. There's no scope for being anything else than smart. Right? And that's as disempowering as a negative label. And sometimes we don't see that. Okay? The negative labels that were there were more difficult to say something. It was easy to say something, it was good. That may be because you all know each other and you don't really want to, behave that way. Because it's not just the gesture, it's not what you say, it's what you hold in your mind. You might not say, I think you're so stupid. But you think that. And if you think that, it is communicated.
I would like to talk about my daughter here. I feel in many cases she's stubborn. And when we say stubbornness is to do with rigidness. And at the same time, when she's not around, I see she has so many qualities of adjustment. These two are totally different qualities. I would say contrast qualities. So why that happens? That's like I'm going through that challenge these days.
I'm seeing her as stubborn. I also know at other times she is not like that and she can be very adjusting. Right? So when you're noticing I'm holding her as stubborn, I'm seeing her as stubborn, right? And that's going to influence everything else that is going to happen next, right? At that time is the moment to pause, to stop, and say, all right, how would it be if I don't see her as stubborn? Don't see her as anything. Don't put her in this box or that box. Right? Like, for example, otherwise you're so adjusting, what is wrong with you now? Right? Yeah, that's also a comment that we make, right? Based on labels, right? But how can we be open and receptive just in that moment and say, what's going on? What do you want to do? Why are you taking so much of time with that? Right. A little engagement of knowing where that is coming from. Right? There was a child who used to always be late coming to school every single day. So the school used to make a lot of adjustments for him, told him several times, that he needs to be on time. But yet he would be late every day. Right? So there were lots of comments about his behavior and about him, right? Not just his behavior. Behavior is very simple, he's just coming late, right? And someone bothered to ask him, finally, why does he get late every day? What's making him get late every day? And he said, on the way there are these birds and there's a bird's nest that he has been like watching every day, and he has to check on those birds, and see how they're doing and whether those eggs have hatched. And he had this whole thing going on in his mind, which he was very, very happy about, right? And just that simple kind of understanding that, okay, that's what he is interested in and that's why he's getting late, removed at least the ideas about him, right? Then there is the behavior, of course, which still remains. Like, you still have to get things done, and she still has to get things done, right? And how can we then maybe engage in a way that evokes cooperation and also maybe a demand, right? But it doesn't come from a place of judgment, right? Judgments are going to come up, but are we aware of it? And then maybe possibly choose something else at the level of mind, speech, or behavior. Okay? Whatever is more accessible for you in that moment. Okay? So I may say something differently, I may do something differently, or I may choose the way or question what I am perceiving. But when you notice judgment and you recognize it as judgment, you recognize it as a label, that becomes the cue that, can I stop here? I'm not seeing the truth of the moment. Okay? I'm not seeing the whole truth of the moment. So it's an invitation.
So when people have some judgment about you, many people around you have some judgment about you, which you are not aware of, and you are not that person. How do we change that perception? If you're not aware of it, and when it comes that we are aware of that people have thought about you in this way, then how do we correct it? Is there any way to do it?
What we can do is be there for ourselves. Be there for ourselves. We may or may not be able to do something about the other person. Yeah? But how can we be there for ourselves? I'll go back to the children, okay? And that might make sense then. So there are certain life messages that are very critical for all children to feel, okay? Life messages that they get from adults around, okay? So what are these life messages? I believe in you. Okay. I trust you. I know you can handle this. You are listened to. Okay. You are cared for. And you are really important to me. All of these messages really convey you are loved. No matter what. How do we receive these messages? Not necessarily verbally. Verbal is one way, we can say this. And it might still not land. We try to say it, no? I believe in you. You can do it. Come on. But it doesn't land. Because it has to be a belief, right? It has to be a belief that you hold within yourself, right? Unquestionable belief, right? In what we were talking about, the innate goodness, the innate capacity to be able to move through situations, and also that you are valuable, which we give by listening, asking them what is important to them, and letting them know in a variety of ways that you are cared for and you're very, very important to me. You matter. Okay? These are very deep, fundamental messages. Okay? The importance of children having these messages is that it becomes their own. Okay? It becomes their own. It's like a given. It's not something they have to tell themselves. I am valuable. They just feel valued. Very few of us have that experience actually. To just feel valued. And it's interesting to kind of inquire into also what happens when we are not judging. When there is no judgment. Right? What happens in those moments? Hmm?
Someone is not judging us or giving not reaction, we feel very ignored.
If someone is not judging us,
Or not giving any expressions or not saying something, if I have done something good or bad, the reaction is required.
yeah, thank you. So what you're saying is, I'm looking for a response, right? I'm not looking but for a judgment, right? Or I'm not looking for something like that. But if I have no response, it can feel very lonely, right? Thank you, yeah. So while we are practicing neutrality, non-preference, we also want to engage, right? We also want to respond. And that's the question, like, how is the response when we are not judging? Right? When somebody is not judging us, what are we kind of like, what do we receive? Okay? Like in the listening, when you were just listening to each other. How was that?
It's safe to share things.
Yeah, it just feels,
Someone is there to listen to us.
yes, someone is there to listen to me, right? No questioning, right? No coming in, no asking us, then why did you do that? Or what did you do? Or can you do it differently? Exactly, yeah? And one of those critical life messages that I am being listened to. That's a responsive state. It's not just a neutral state, right? It's a very responsive, engaged state. Yeah. How else did we feel when it felt safe to share? How else did we feel when we were listening to each other? Hmm? You can be yourself. You can be yourself, whoever you are, however you are, it's okay. Right? And there's a great sense of okayness about it. You're not saying you're okay, you can say whatever you want. You're not saying all of that. Right? You're just bringing 100% attention. That's what's making the difference. right, to this. So we are all capable of this whole space of being non-judgmental. When we bring in this attention, right, and we start to see things, that's when we start to see, okay, what is the truth here, right? So maybe we can leave it here, but just let's again come into just a 1 minute pause and just to absorb however it is for us right now. See what's the feeling, maybe what are the questions. Maybe what's a resolve. What's a reminder? And gently opening your eyes. And just looking around the circle before you all go into the smaller groups, that all of us are in it together. It's a common human experience that we all share.